On June 6, 2026, the center of New Delhi looked like a surrealist play. Hundreds of young people descended on the Jantar Mantar protest site, standing face-to-face with heavily armored riot police. But instead of throwing rocks, they wore crude insect masks and held out single flowers. They called themselves the Cockroach Janta Party, a satirical political front that formed practically overnight. This chart shows their Instagram following compared to traditional, mainstream political parties in India. In less than a month, this parody account amassed over 22 million followers. The movement gained new legitimacy when veteran activists like Sonam Wangchuk arrived at the protest site, sitting down on the pavement alongside the students. The insect masks and the memes were hiding a much darker reality. This bizarre uprising was the desperate symptom of an entire generation that felt it had been pushed to the brink by the collapse of the institutions supposed to protect their future. The outrage was triggered by two specific, catastrophic failures. First, the 2026 NEET UG medical entrance exam papers leaked to the public. Shortly after, the Central Board of Secondary Education's digital marking system suffered a massive technical collapse. For millions of students in these densely packed exam halls, their years of intense preparation were instantly rendered meaningless. To see the crisis scale, look at the math. This chart compares the rising youth population against stagnant university seats and jobs. Notice the red markers on this timeline. These pinpoint severe spikes in student suicides, correlating directly with exam results and leaked paper scandals. The protesters aimed their anger at a single target: Union Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan. The objective of their march was to force his resignation. When traditional political avenues offer zero solutions to life-or-death systemic failures, victims are left with a choice. They can accept defeat, or they can adopt entirely unconventional, radical identities just to force the establishment to hear them. The spark for this movement came from a courtroom in May 2026. During a hearing, the Chief Justice of India reportedly made a comment comparing unqualified youths entering the legal system to cockroaches and parasites. Rather than issuing defensive press releases, a 30-year-old political strategist named Abhijeet Dipke saw an opportunity. He and his followers weaponized the insult. They leaned directly into the joke, embracing the cockroach identity as a badge of honor. Generating memes is easy. The real logistical hurdle was converting 22 million digital followers into a disciplined physical protest on the streets of New Delhi. To pull it off, the organizers issued a strict do's and don'ts list to their followers. To prevent the state from legally branding them as a violent mob, every protester was mandated to carry the national flag and, specifically, a copy of the Constitution of India. The organizers also explicitly instructed their followers to bring flowers, using them as a de-escalation tactic to offer to the police lines. By strictly enforcing a code of peace, satire, and constitutionalism, the group created an organizational shield. Riot police are trained to deploy tear gas and batons against aggressive crowds. They have no standard operating procedure to neutralize thousands of teenagers peacefully handing them roses. The physical police weren't the only obstacle. Once at Jantar Mantar, the protesters faced a hostile media environment. Reporters waded into the crowd, actively trying to bait the young organizers on camera. Journalists aggressively pushed microphones into protesters' faces, asking them to defend controversial political figures. The goal was to secure a soundbite that could instantly reframe the Cockroach Janta Party as a violent or radical group. But the protesters didn't take the bait. They refused the premise of the questions, pivoting every single conversation straight back to Dharmendra Pradhan and the leaked exam papers. They consciously rejected the traditional Hindu-Muslim political divides that have historically dominated Indian political discourse. When asked about religious wedge issues, they simply demanded accountability for their education. This is the advantage of a generation raised entirely on the internet. Gen Z possesses a high level of media literacy. They know exactly how narrative traps function, which makes them uniquely immune to falling into them. They controlled the agenda by refusing to play the media's game. The government's response to the gathering at Jantar Mantar was staggering. They deployed over 1,000 troops, 40 distinct paramilitary companies, and erected extensive steel barricades across the city. Look at the sheer scale of that military mobilization, and then look at the reality of the people they were mobilizing against. You had columns of riot gear squaring off against young students holding roses and reading the autobiography of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. This contrast exposes an inherent vulnerability in authoritarian-style systems. They are meticulously built to crush violent physical opposition, but they are entirely unequipped to combat self-deprecating irony. Deploying a massive paramilitary force against an internet joke provided a kind of validation for the movement. It proved that the government views the youth's satire not as a silly prank, but as a genuine destabilizing threat to their authority. The massive turnout on June 6th definitively disproves the long-held myth that Gen Z is politically apathetic. They care deeply. They just refuse to engage on the establishment's terms. These students bypassed traditional political institutions entirely. In less than a month, they invented a new, digital-first language of dissent. There is a poetic irony in the label the Chief Justice originally used to dismiss them. By calling the youth cockroaches, the establishment accidentally invoked a creature defined by its ability to survive and persist in environments where others perish. In just weeks, a satirical meme evolved from an online joke into a disciplined physical movement that forced a national security response. It suggests that when institutions stop working, the youth will find entirely new ways to be seen.